Welcome back, Week 6 wide receivers, rankings and tiers. Let's hop right into it. Coming in at S tier, all the guys you already know to start, so I'm basically skipping them. Now, kicking it off with A tier, all of these guys should be started in 10 to 12 team leagues. The only one you might have any hesitation with is Teteroa McMillan, but let me tell you, do not hesitate. The Cowboys have been burned by wide receivers so far in the season. Malik Neighbors, 9 for 167 and 2. Luther Burden had over 100 yards and a touchdown. Romeo Doubs had his 3-touchdown game against them. And then Garrett Wilson went 6 for 71 and a touchdown just last week. So do not leave Teteroa McMillan on your bench. And then kicking off B tier, I do have Garrett Wilson versus the Denver Broncos in London. Now the Broncos, they are 5th best against wide receivers, and that's mainly because Pat Surtain. You could start Wilson, but certainly temper your expectations or feel free to move to any other player in B tier. Next up, I have Michael Pittman versus the Arizona Cardinals. He's been a super solid wide receiver 2 for your roster all season long outside of his one game versus the aforementioned Pat Surtain. So I'm expecting another solid performance here versus the Cardinals. Next up, Quentin Johnston versus Miami. Now, he did have his first down week in week 5. It's not like he wasn't out there. He only ran one less route than Ladd, who led the entire team in routes. But Johnston is still the wide receiver you want for the Chargers. And Johnston is the one wide receiver out of the 3 who can make that big play. Now, on the other side of the ball, I have Jalen Waddle versus the Chargers. Saved his day with a 46-yard touchdown with 4 minutes left in the game. Now, it's not to say that he couldn't have gotten that touchdown or even more yards on that drive, but it's part of Waddle's game that you have to consider. He'll be good for the volume perspective, but what really takes him over the edge is going to be his speed and those big plays. He'll face the 4th hardest matchup in Week 6. And next, I have Xavier Worthy versus the Lions. He's still ramping up in this offense. Week over week, his snap percentage has gone up. We really want him and Mahomes to connect on one of these deep plays. That's what takes Xavier Worthy really over the top. But against the Lions, who have scored the most points so far in the league and a really high over-under 50.5 points, I think Worthy is worth throwing into your lineup. And then I have Stephon Diggs versus the New Orleans Saints. He's had back-to-back 100-yard receiving games. He looks great on the field, even after the catch. He's only playing about 50 to 60% of the snaps, which is a little concerning, but when he's on the field, obviously he's out there making plays. So after back-to-back 100-yard games, I now look at Diggs as somebody is a very, very strong flex option. And then kicking off C tier, I have Keenan Allen versus the Miami Dolphins. Keenan has gotten 5 receptions or more in all of his games, between about 50 to 70 yards in 4 of his 5 games, and found the end zone in 3 out of 5 games. Now, in PPR leagues, he's a solid option. Not a home run threat, and you're not going to be happy with his production unless he finds the end zone. And for what it's worth, those touchdowns, Keenan Allen leads the Chargers with 5 end zone targets compared to Quentin Johnston's 3 and Ladd McConkey's 2. Okay, now the next 2 guys, stop me if you've heard this before, but Ricky Pearsall and Terry McLaurin are not practicing on Wednesday. If they play, this is where they would rank. It's a wonderful shootout potential with both games. I like them, but they got to play. And then probably I get more questions than anybody else in my live streams with A.J. Brown. He's playing the New York Giants here on Thursday Night Football. Now, on paper, it's an amazing matchup. Really couldn't be better. However, the Eagles' neutral game pass rate has gone up each and every single week, but I'm not really expecting this to be a neutral game. Neither does Vegas. The Giants, 7.5-point underdogs versus the Eagles. So I'm viewing A.J. Brown as kind of like Jameson Williams, where he has the potential for a huge play on any given week, especially in this game here versus the Giants, but the volume may not be there. Then Ladd McConkey versus the Dolphins. Ladd and Keenan could benefit from Amarian Hampton being sidelined for 4 weeks. Now, no, he's not going to be going out there and taking running back snaps. But Amarian Hampton had 18 targets over these last 3 weeks, and that offensive line is absolutely beat up. So we could see more of the short area targets for Ladd and even Keenan in the meantime. Next up, I do have Zay Flowers versus the Rams. Zay Flowers, in some ways, is kind of like Keenan Allen, where you're not really happy unless he gets a touchdown, but he's pretty much a lock for about 60 to 70 yards on each and every single given week. Much more athletic than Keenan Allen, so he can have those big plays. Now, the Ravens, they do pass the least amount in the entire league right now, and the quarterback situation is still under review. Like, we're trying to figure out who's going to be the starter. Is it Cooper Rush? Is it Tyler Huntley? Someone else that comes in? But all signs right now point to no Lamar Jackson in Week 6. Brian Thomas Jr. versus the Seattle Seahawks. I love seeing him win some of the battles for the ball. taking some contact, which is something fantasy managers and NFL fans were concerned about in the earlier weeks of the season. He's not in my top 24, but he's still flexed with enormous upside, so it's encouraging seeing him come off of his best game so far on the season. And then in D tier, and you could argue that he could be a little bit lower, Jacoby Myers versus the Tennessee Titans. I'm going up to bat for him again, but how many weeks in a row can we do this? Geno Smith looked awful. The offense, awful. In week 5, we saw the Colts run up the score 40-6. Like, how is Myers not involved in that game script whatsoever? I'm really frustrated with him, and if you want to put him at the bottom of this D tier or even an E tier, I'm okay with that. Going to the other side of the ball with the other offense, I've got Calvin Ridley versus those Raiders. Can you trust Ridley? Absolutely not. But did he just have his best game of the season? Yes. Did the Titans win? Yes. Perhaps what we just saw in week 5, we could see in week 6 versus the Raiders, who are 4th worst against wide receivers. And you might have thought this guy was still on bye, but no, he is in my rankings. It's DK Metcalf versus the Cleveland Browns. Metcalf is 18th among wide receivers and fantasy points per game. He's also 62nd in targets per game with 5.5 targets. That's a recipe I don't like. He's always a threat to take a touchdown to the house, just as he did the last time we saw him on the field. But if he doesn't find the end zone, you could be left holding the bag. Chris Olave versus the New England Patriots. Big plays? Not Olave's game. He hasn't been doing that so far here in 2025. Think of the Saints version of Zay Flowers. That's what Olave is. Really need a touchdown for you to be happy with him on any given week. And he's only getting you about 50-ish yards on about 6 receptions on average. So, and he gets Christian Gonzalez. That's not ideal. Jameson Williams versus the Chiefs. Not going to beat a dead horse. 50.5 point over under. That's awesome. Jameson Williams' production on almost every single game so far this season. Not awesome. If you're a massive underdog, I like starting him. If not, let him ride your bench. Now, this guy got a quarterback upgrade with T. Higgins versus Green Bay. He's had 3 receptions or less in every single game so far this season. And he's also had 33 yards or less in 4 of 5 games. Now, again, is Joe Flacco a quarterback upgrade? I doubt it. Higgins' average depth of target is 13.4. Among wide receivers who have ran 150 or more routes, meaning full-time players, he is 5th in average depth of target. Basically saying that offensive line really needs to hold up before he can get a target downfield. I don't think they're going to hold up. Give Flacco enough time for T. Higgins to get the ball. And then I have Wan'Dale Robinson on Thursday Night Football versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Will the Giants be down against the Eagles and have to pass? Most likely. Now, Wan'Dale, he's tied with Theo Johnson and Cam Scadaboo, 7 targets in Week 5. He certainly led the wide receivers, and Darius Slayton is already out for this Thursday Night Football matchup. I really only like him in PPR leagues. Coming into E tier, I'm going to kind of blitz some of these fellas, but Travis Hunter versus the Seahawks. Brenton Strange went down about halfway through the game on their Monday Night Football win against the Chiefs. At the same time, we saw Hunter have his best game as a pro. Now, if for whatever reason Travis Hunter is on your waivers, you do need to scoop him up and stash him on your bench. You can start him, but I'd much rather see what his role in the offense is without Strange. Juwan Jennings, much like Ricky Pearsall, he's not practicing. However, this is where I would rank him if he does play. It's Wednesday, and spoiler alert, Kendrick Bourne isn't in my top 50 wide receivers. But if all the starters are out again, you'll be able to see that he makes an appearance for sure. So if you're subscribed, make sure you do turn on notifications so you know when I do go live and talk about these 49ers and all the other situations that are going. And if you can't make it to my live, that's perfectly fine. My rankings are in the link on my bio, and they update hourly. Devonta Smith versus the Giants. Much like A.J. Brown, I don't really want to start either one of these guys because the matchup is nice, but the passing volume probably isn't there. You've had 2 great games out of Smith, and again, these are in games where the Eagles were down and needed to throw the ball. So if you think the Giants have a shot and the Eagles are going to have to pass a lot, Vegas doesn't. But if you do, go ahead and start them. And the next guy I have here is another wide receiver too for their team, DJ Moore versus Washington. I do think Moore is talented, and he could be a very strong wide receiver somewhere else, but they simply don't use him enough in Chicago to make him start worthy for your fantasy roster. Next up, Khalil Shakir versus Atlanta. The Falcons are 6th best against wide receivers. Again, another player where you need a touchdown or you're really unhappy. And speaking about touchdowns, we need yards as well. we need both touchdowns and yards from Chris Godwin. He plays the San Francisco 49ers. In a game just last week versus the Seahawks where it ended 38-35, I really, really wanted more from Godwin. 26 receiving yards in both games so far in the season. He's a full-time player too. He's out there playing 70-80% of the snaps. So is he still ramping up? Possibly, but it's something we need to see before we start him in our fantasy lineups. And the last person on E tier I have is Romeo Doubs versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now don't forget, just 2 weeks ago is when we saw Doubs have a 3-touchdown performance against the Cowboys. Is he going to do 3 touchdowns again? Probably not. The Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love just spread the ball way too much for any one of these wide receivers for Green Bay to really be fantasy relevant. It's a shot in the dark each and every single week until someone emerges. And then going on to F tier, this is mainly just a list of stash guys and boom bust players. Like they either need to show it to you first or they need an injury in front of them to promote them to stardom.